Mark Spencer here from rippletraining.com and applemotion.net with a tip on the power of shapes. Shapes are just incredibly great objects for creating motion graphics in motion. Very, very useful tools. Can be animated in all kinds of ways, used in 3D. And just wanted to go over a few things about them and talk a little bit about a new product I have of some additional shapes that you can add to Motion's library. So to create shapes, first of all, we have some shape tools up here in the toolbar. The default is the little rectangle here where you can draw rectangles or squares by holding down the Shift key. And under that is the circle tool for drawing ovals, or again with the Shift key held down you can draw a circle. And then there's a line tool, so you can draw straight lines. Holding the Shift key down will make them straight up and down. And then there's a Bezier tool if you want to draw your own shapes. If you just click, you can get sharp angles. If you click and drag, you can create curves and you can close it and have a shape there. There's even a B-spline shape tool beneath that that does a very similar thing in drawing shapes. So those are great and very useful for drawing your own shapes. There's also, let me just delete those, in Motion's library, if we go to the library under shapes, there are a set of shapes here as well. There are 16 different shapes that ship with Motion. Some real basic shapes like a star and an octagon and a quote bubble, things like that. Just basic shapes that are very useful to have. But there's not that much there, and I work with shapes a lot, and I really wanted to do more with shapes. You can bring graphics in from something like Illustrator or Photoshop, but you can't adjust those graphics the way you can with shapes. You can't animate them the way you can with shapes. So I've created a new product, an expansion pack for Motion's library for Motion shapes. This is 101 everyday shapes that you can use just like you use any of the shapes that ship with Motion. So I'm going to use them as an example here. I'm going to go to the file browser, and in my desktop I'm going to go into my Shapes Volume 1, and here we have a set of different shapes in various categories, 101 different shapes. I'm going to go into the animal category right here and grab this little lizard and throw him in here. Now these shapes, just like any shape, can be scaled as much as you want. They are vector based, so they won't get soft or pixelated. You can scale them, rotate them. The cool thing about shapes is you can edit them. So if I right click and choose edit points, you can select any of these points and move them around to adjust the shape. And you can even select multiple shapes. We want to make his nose a little shorter, or perhaps we want to select his little hand here and move it around. Of course, you had recording turned on. You could record this action and it would record and play back this way. It's very easy to modify that shape after the fact, which is really great. Other things you can do with shapes once you bring them in, if we look in the heads-up display, we've got a bunch of options here. First of all, the fill can be filled with a different color. It doesn't have to be that default color. You can add an outline. You can change the width of the outline. And of course, you can change the color of the outline to something else as well. Very easy to do those basic things. You can take it a little bit further. If we go to the inspector, and that's where you always go to see how deep you can go, the shape tab has these 4 different panes here, and I'm telling you, you can go very deep here, but just for a quick look at things, the fill mode is set to color, but we can choose a gradient instead, and that'll immediately fill our little guy here with a gradient, very ugly gradient. We could choose one of the preset gradients that ship with Motion here to fill it with something else. Or we can open up the gradient editor here and choose different colors, or we could right click directly on the little lizard here and choose edit gradient and use this very handy gradient tool to perhaps change the angle of the gradient and change the colors, what have you. You can do directly here in the canvas and create. Let me just do something different. There we go. Something like that. So very easy to fill a shape with a gradient and change how that gradient looks. Now, from here, Motion also ships with a bunch of shape styles, and these are incredibly powerful. So if we go up here, we can see the shape style pop-up menu. If I click on that, there's a bunch of different categories, and you can see if I just go to each one, they're all kind of different shape styles, and that'll replace your current shape with one of these. So for instance, if I choose light and then light streak 01 and play back, we'll immediately get an animated light streak that is the outline of that shape. We can change its width a little bit if we want right there. And pretty amazing that you can do something like that quickly to create a little animation on your shape. Now, we can go to some of these other ones as well. And in fact, you can choose them here in the inspector, but if you want to use the heads-up display, it's a little closer. You can keep it closer to your object. And let's see, we can go to fauna and perhaps use mohair as another example. And then it's covered with this sort of mohair looking thing, and we can change the color by adjusting it here in the heads-up display. Or we can go back into the shape style pop-up menu and look at something like flora and maybe use the lawn, kind of fill him with grass here. Sometimes it'll take a minute to update. You can see some of these are animated, some of them are not. It really depends on which one you choose. And an even faster way to pick these that I prefer is to go to the library under Shape Styles. You can see all of them here. So I'll go to Garnish, for example, and grab this one called Toothpicks and just drag it right on the shape. And then we'll get a completely different look here. But we can still go back to the shape. We can adjust the width of those little toothpicks. And remember, if we right-click on that shape, we can still edit any of these points. That's what's the really cool thing here, is that the shape remains editable no matter what you do, which I just love. Let's go to Liquid for another example and choose something like Ink Dilate and drag it on here. And that immediately creates animation. So, like I said, some of these are animated, some are not. But quite amazing the types of things you can do. And if you have a great variety of shapes, the possibilities are really pretty endless here. Let's look at Textural. There's all kind of interesting textures in here. Let's grab the one called Splatter, for example, and throw it on there. And we get a completely different look. And it's also animated. Let's go to Traditional. And we'll grab something like Acrylic and throw it on there. And sometimes you have to wait a minute for to update here. Some of these take a fair amount of processing power, and we'll get a more static look there, but a very interesting look like it's drawn with acrylic there. Now we're getting a lot of extra little movies in here, and that's simply because for motion to draw these shapes, it uses little movies frequently to draw these shapes. So I'll just get rid of those. And let's go back to Textural. Let's go to Traditional. I'll drag on the 3D brush here. And then we kind of a 3D look. Now this one is not animated by default, but it's very easy to animate it. In fact, if we go in the library under Behaviors, there are a set of shape behaviors for creating animation. So I'll just drag this right on behavior onto the shape, and then over the mini timeline, I will hit O to trim an out point, and then bang, that shape will animate on the screen just like that. A nice little 3D look. We can still adjust the width, we can adjust the color, adjust the points, anything, while it's playing back. Really quite terrific. One more I'll just drag on here is Randomized Shape. If I drag that on here, that will cause the shape to kind of jitter around, and we can use the heads-up display to decrease the amount of jitter. And I'm actually going to turn off that overlay with Command/ just so we can see the object a little better. And then we've got a nervous little over-caffeinated lizard drawing onto the screen with a nice little 3D stroke. So that's just a quick overview of some of the basic things you can do in terms of creating, styling, and adding shape styles to shapes. There's much more that's involved. If you want to check out this library expansion pack, please check out applemotion.net. And for more training on how to use Motion, please check out rippletraining.com. Thanks for watching.